What's up, Taiwan? I'm Liao with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Dozens of Chinese military vessels and planes have come close to Taiwan in the last 24 hours as China wraps up 2 days of war games. The Defense Ministry says it detected 62 Chinese aircraft and 27 warships in areas around Taiwan. 47 of those aircraft crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait separating Taiwan and China. China launched its joint sword exercises 3 days after President Lai Ching-te's inauguration. China claims Taiwan, and Beijing says the drills are punishment for the new president, saying that Taiwan and China are two separate countries. Protests against proposed changes to the law are rocking Taiwan, both inside the legislature and in the streets. Harel Hughes brings us the latest.
Another day of chaos in Taiwan's legislature. On Friday, lawmakers resumed readings of deeply controversial bills that would drastically expand legislative powers. Divisive items that would give lawmakers the power to compel testimony and fine or jail those who don't answer questions completely. The bills are the work of two opposition parties, the Kuomintang, or KMT, and Taiwan People's Party, the TPP, who together form a majority. The two parties are trying to push the bills through over stiff opposition from the Democratic Progressive Party. And at times, the proceedings have taken a violent turn.
从后面过来打我，我再说我就转过来这样子，就我也没有看到后面嘛，对不对？我就要转过来这样子。
我是自我防卫，他先出手，我自我防卫。今嘛流行，今嘛是咧流行哦，怕人话救人。
Civic groups say the way the legislators handled the bills goes against fair and normal procedures.
The lack of procedural justice in the enactment of these bills is even more worrying, as there has been no substantive room for serious review or civic participation or input. Abiding by normal legislative procedures would have actually improved the quality of legislative reform and the prospects of implementation.
And thousands of people in Taiwan also have concerns. Organizers of a Friday protest against the bills outside the legislature say 100,000 people turned out, and 5 other protests took place in other parts of the country.
我们要求公平正义的讨论，我们拒绝黑箱的一个国会作业。
我现在最担心就是他的所有法案目前对人民，包括不能请律师，包括不能就是拒绝所有立法委员，这是一个立法委员扩权的法案，我觉得这是非常不合理的。
只要蓝白立委联合的话，那所有什么法案都可以过，只要迎合中国的话，那什么法案都有可能通过，就算民进党再怎么努力。
Lawmakers are readying for the third reading, set for next week. Protesters say they'll be there too, making their voices heard from outside the chamber. Eason Chen and Harel Hughes for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's Constitutional Court has deemed a clause protecting civil servants from insults partially unconstitutional. The ruling means a retrial for a controversial case from 2018.
Yang Hui-ru is getting a second day in court. In 2018, she took to the internet to criticize Su Qi-chen, then Taiwan's representative in Osaka, Japan. The costliest typhoon in Japan's history had just struck, leaving Taiwanese tourists stranded, an event that put so much pressure on Su he committed suicide. Yang's remarks about the diplomat's handling of the situation and the comments she paid others to leave for her were found to be insulting a civil servant's performance and therefore against the law. But Taiwan's Constitutional Court now says the ban on insulting civil servants isn't entirely constitutional, and that criticism should be protected under free speech.
人民对于政府机关及其职务，包括法令政策制定以及各项公务执行的意义、质疑、批评等意见以及评价，本来就具有监督施政、促进民主的重要功能，受到宪法言论自由的保障。
But the court also ruled that free speech should be limited when insult is aimed at a civil servant's performance.
基于妨碍公务之主观目的，且足以影响公务员执行公务之情形，于此范围内，实与宪法第11条保障言论自由之意旨无违。
There will now be a retrial.
我对宪法法庭的 结果都尊重，但是我自己期待自己之后能够变成一个更好的人。
Taiwan's constitution is the highest law in the land, but it is still subject to correction and reinterpretation. This latest ruling will not only see Young's case retried, but also the law amended to reflect the court's decision. Howard Zhang and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan is sending its health minister to the World Health Assembly in Geneva next week. That's despite Taiwan not being invited.
可是我想大家知道，这个中共的打压是使得台湾没有办法参加的唯一原因。我们也利用这个机会，好好的让全世界的人知道，为台湾来发声。
China's claim over Taiwan means it blocks Taiwan's attempts to join United Nations-related events. Taiwan will instead send a delegation to lobby for participation in the WHA. The United States, the UK, Canada, and Japan are among countries speaking out against Taiwan's exclusion. Guatemala's president says ties with Taiwan could be disrupting trade with China. It comes after China blocked shipments of Guatemalan nuts and coffee. The Central American nation is just one of 12 countries that recognize Taiwan. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory. Guatemalan President Bernardo Arévalo says China could be responding to his country's attendance at the inauguration of Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, on Monday. The International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to stop its assault on Gaza's southern city of Rafah.
The court considers that, in conformity with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part.
The order comes as part of an emergency ruling in a genocide case against Israel brought by South Africa. The court's orders are not binding, and Israeli ministers have indicated they won't comply. Earlier this week, a separate international court applied for an arrest warrant for Israeli and Hamas leaders. Over 35,000 people have been killed in Gaza since the Israel-Hamas war began in October. Here in Taiwan, there have been demonstrations both in protest of Israel's war in Gaza as well as in support of the country. Our reporter Rick Lauert spoke to Mor Sabol of Taiwan's Tamkang University to find out more about Taiwan's relationship with Israel.
Could you tell us about Taiwan's relationship with Israel and why the two countries may be growing closer at the moment?
Taiwan sees Israel as a sister democracy which is fighting a hostile environment. The fact that Taiwan sees Israel as a role model in terms of civil resilience, in terms of military capacities, in terms of relations with the US. Here you could connect it also to the issue of support for like-minded countries which represent democratic and liberal values. In comparison to the Palestinians, and not necessarily just about Hamas and the fact that we are talking about opposing views and values and norms. The fact that the Palestinians are, for the most part, aligning themselves publicly with the Chinese intention of unifying with Taiwan.
And how does Israel view Taiwan and China?
I think that nowadays we could see interesting development. It's still very, very slow and low key, but it seems that Israel is reconsidering its position vis-a-vis China. And it started even before that, before October 7th, during the Trump administration, and then with Biden administration, with the immense pressure on the Israelis to detach from Chinese investment, and Taiwan tried to exploit this fact to get closer to Israel. And certainly after October 7th, with the Chinese response and complete support for the Palestinians and for Hamas, and very, very, I would say even extreme extreme criticism to the verge of anti-Semitism towards Israel.
Here in Taiwan, we've seen public rallies in support of Israel, but also in support of Palestine and condemning some of Israel's actions in Gaza. Do you think the Taiwan-Israel relationship may change?
I don't think that we will see any change regardless if we have demonstrations or not in Taiwan. The Taiwanese were Taiwan was one of the first countries to support Israel, to condemn the terror attack. And if we look at the Taiwanese statements and also actions, we didn't see any change whatsoever in the last 7 months. And I don't think that it's going to change anytime soon.
That was Assistant Professor Moore Sabol speaking to Rick Glauert about Taiwan's relationship with Israel. The United Nations is warning of an upsurge in violence in western Myanmar, home to the country's minority Rohingya population.
We are receiving frightening and disturbing reports from northern Rakhine State in Myanmar of the impacts of the conflict on civilian lives and property. Some of the most serious allegations concern incidents of killing of Rohingya civilians and the burning of their property. Tens of thousands of civilians have been displaced in recent days by the fighting in Butidong and Mangdao townships.
As civil war rages throughout Myanmar, a powerful Buddhist ethnic group known as the Arakan Army has taken control of parts of Rakhine. Rohingya have faced persecution in Buddhist-majority Myanmar for decades, and in 2017, a brutal military-led crackdown forced hundreds of thousands to flee to neighboring Bangladesh. A startup in Finland is creating food from microbes, air, and electricity. The company envisions a future where green, lab-grown sustenance keeps food on the table. John Van Trieste reports.
Just outside Helsinki, Finland, is a lab preparing what could be the food of the future. Here, technicians feed microbes air, minerals, and electricity and get a protein-rich powder they call soline. The plant's owners, Startup Solar Foods, only started producing soline here in April, but they are already excited about introducing this new product to the world.
Soline is a single-cell protein we produce by applying a technology called gas fermentation. We grow this single-cell organism that is very rich in protein by feeding for it as main feedstock hydrogen and carbon dioxide. This is the point where we can disconnect food production from agriculture. We let the organism just grow and multiply in our bioreactors. Then we harvest and dry the microbe, and that microbe itself is called soline, a protein-rich powder.
The electricity that powers the process comes from renewable sources, making it a green alternative to meat or dairy farming, both major carbon emitters. Soline production emits 130 times less carbon than beef production does, and cutting carbon emissions in agriculture is one of the company's big aims.
We want to tackle this problem of land use and replace nutritionally animal, so that in the future much of the animal-like nutrition of today actually can be produced, for example, through cellular agriculture, and we can let agricultural land to rewild.
But eco-friendliness isn't Soline's only selling point. Already, the company's found a range of culinary uses, from bread to ravioli and ice cream. And it's still exploring other possibilities.
We can replace egg, for example, in pasta applications, vegan mayo, and so on.
The hard part is convincing governments around the world to approve soline for human consumption. Singapore already allows it, but the United States and even the European Union, of which Finland's a member, do not. There will also need to be a serious ramping up of production for soline to have the environmental impact the company envisions. But its founders say this is just proof of concept, and that a future of food grown from air may be just around the corner. John Su and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Finally, we bring you the latest update on the progress of the Olympic torch as it passes through Bordeaux, the renowned winemaking region in France. I'm Liao. Take care and see you next time.